Welcome to the February episode of Healthbeat, Bekisisa's monthly television program. I'm Mia Malan. Late last year, after decades of debate, our government finally moved towards decriminalizing sex work. Amendments to the Sexual Offences Act and Criminal Law Act that make the buying and the selling of adult sex legal were published. The deadline for public comment on the amendments closed at the end of January, and it's now up to Parliament to vote for or against the proposed changes. Later in the show, I'll be joined by Deputy Justice Minister John Jeffrey and the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the Right to Health, Dr. Tlaleng Mofokeng. They'll discuss the proposed new legislation and its possible impact. But first, let's find out what many South African sex workers are routinely exposed to. This report by Dylan Bush was filmed some time ago, but by all accounts, the harsh reality of life on the streets hasn't changed.
You're a sex worker, you were jantu, you were this, you were that, calling me ugly things.
Some of us get killed, lots of us been killed. We've lost lots of sisters here.
They like throw stones at us and want to rob us and things like that. I live here under the bridge. Me and my sisters. My daily job and at night times is sex work. So that is actually my only income.
If I am a sex worker, I become a criminal. The client becomes a criminal. And if my children or family are fed of that money, they become criminals too. So they can go to prison for my sex work.
The name says sex work is a form of labor and a service, just like in being a waitress or being a nurse or a doctor.
If the van goes around and they get you on that same spot, they chase you away from the corner, or they want to take your condoms from you, they want to take your money from you, or they want to put you in the van and go and leave you at the mountain, or they want you to suck their cocks.
If you take a soccer player, what do they play soccer? Part of their body. Rugby, what do they play? Part of their body. Any sport in South Africa. And he's taking money by using his bodies. They say we sell bodies, we don't sell bodies, we sell sex.
You don't have to agree with sex work to support decrim. Even if you want to end the industry, surely you want people who are in the industry to have access to rights and have access to being able to report violence against them.
Sadly, most of the sex workers who participated in that story have passed away. The hazards of a profession regarded as illegal by many governments the world over. except for progressive countries like New Zealand, which decriminalised sex work 20 years ago. I spoke to Alan Heater-Cleaver, a sex worker in New Zealand who has operated before and after decriminalisation.
So I entered the industry as a 14-year-old, and so I've had over 40 years of experience in that industry, pre-legislation change and then post-legislation change. Worked full-time in my earlier years and then kind of in and out of the industry over the years. And then I went back into full-time probably about 10 years ago, which gave me a real insight into the changes post-legislation change. The biggest thing is that I can't get arrested now. In my early days, I used to get arrested and have police charges of soliciting, prostitution, and now I don't have to deal with the police in terms of that, and that it's a honoured profession now. And it's recognised, and it just gives me a lot more legality in the country and just as a human being.
Has decrim changed the places from where you operate? Are you now able to operate from safer spaces?
Absolutely. In my early days, because it was illegal, there weren't a lot of options. It did push you into unsafe spaces to be working from, but now post-legislation change, it's a lot safer and I can control where I work and I don't have to actually be street-based. I can if I choose to, but I choose not to. And so I can control my space and where clients are coming into and be in a lot safer position.
When you say that you can operate from a safer space now, what is an example of such a space?
Hopping into a vehicle on the street, quickly trying to ascertain, are you safe? Is this person an undercover police person? Are they a client? Are they likely to be violent? Are they likely to rob me? Quickly making that decision and then getting into the vehicle and getting away from the where you worked as such, and then going into dark space that is deserted and you're at the mercy of what could happen, as opposed to now I don't have to be standing on the street. I can control who comes in and they're coming into my space, and so I have all these safety procedures in place to keep myself safe.
You say that you don't have to operate from the street now. So what is the space? Is it your house? Is it a brothel? How does it work?
For me personally, I work from home. I'm a home-based operator, so I just work independently, but I always have a segregated space within where I live, and that is specifically set up for sex work, so it has its own entrance, its own bathroom, so there's no crossover between where I actually live and I work. But it is all within the same building.
What kind of safety procedures can you implement at your house now that you couldn't do previously?
Well, now the clients are done via cell phone, so I have a number, so I have I can track who they are, and I actually have I can tell somebody that I'm going to do a job, let them know, okay, I've got a job happening at this particular time, I'll be finished at this particular time, and then reporting back in after, and that's just a friend. So in regards to doing mobile work, going into a hotel and doing an out call, I can ring into the hotel now and get to the room number, so then I have a record of where I'm going to, and it's all been it's been verified by going through the hotel reception. So then I know, okay, I'm going to that room, it's legit, and I can let somebody know that I'm going to that Pacific hotel, I'm going to that room, I'm going to be working for that long, and to expect a call from me after.
Pre-decrim, the police was clearly the enemy, and now they seem to have become an ally. How has that played out for you?
I know now, if I was to be a victim of sexual assault, I know that I can ring the police now, or if I was, say, to be robbed or something like that, I can ring the police. They will act upon it now and pursue the perpetrator on my behalf. And I've seen that happening now.
Which of your labour laws are particularly useful to sex workers?
That it's a recognised work now, and so that you can pay your taxes, you can claim, like say with the pandemic, as a sex worker, you had access to government-funded benefits because it was a recognised job now. So if you had all your paperwork done and you paid all your taxes, it's you had access to all these other benefits that you never used to in the past.
Has the stigma that's associated with sex work changed after decrim?
I believe that the work has been taken out of the darkness and out of being secret and kind of pushed into these kind of shady, dark spaces, and it's been brought out into the light.
Here at home, apart from legalizing the buying and the selling of adult sex, the decriminalization of sex work also signifies a meeting of the minds between the Health and Justice Departments. With me to discuss this, I have Deputy Justice Minister John Jeffrey and Health Advocate Dr. Tlaleng Mofokeng, who so many of us have come to know as Dr. T. Dr. T is also the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the Right to Health. To both of you, thanks very much for making the time to be here today. Dr. T, you've travelled a long road on behalf of sex workers. What does this mean to you and them?
This is such an important milestone for South Africa, and I think it signifies the extent to which the government has listened to the voices of sex workers who are at the forefront of many of the human rights violations that they experience. And, you know, my own coming into this sector of sex work and sex workers' human rights, you know, was as a medical student having to assist women who have faced particular violence, who have particular needs around their health, who are sex workers, but who couldn't freely get those services because of criminalization.
Deputy Minister, public comment has now closed for the amendments, the proposed changes. What happens now?
What has to happen now is those public comments have to be considered, evaluated and considered by the department. And then we'll see whether we think that any changes should be made to the bill. Whatever is done, then we'll have to go back to Cabinet for a decision as to, or for what we'll be asking for is permission to introduce it into Parliament. Then it will go to Parliament, first to the National Assembly. They will have to follow a public participation process, a much more rigorous one, in fact, even have public hearings when they consider on the bill. And then if passed by the National Assembly, it will go to the National Council of Provinces. So it's still some way to go, but we hope to have it completed before the end of the term.
Dr. T, we've heard in the insert that we've played earlier that if we decrim sex work, it could have quite a dramatic impact on gender-based violence. But what about the health of sex workers? You've alluded to it a little bit. What would the impact be on HIV infection rates, for instance?
The issue of sex work actually is a human rights issue simply because of the key principles involved. Privacy, for example, dignity, bodily integrity, autonomy, and the decision to be able to have your own health in your hands and have a healthcare system that is responsive and supportive of those decisions. And with criminalization, it limits to the extent to which sex workers can actually firstly go to a facility, but even when they're at the facility, it impacts the quality of consultation they're able to have, because a lot of the questions that will be asked, for example, how many sexual partners do you have? They can't honestly answer that question because of the judgment that then comes, which we then miss an important opportunity as healthcare workers and providers to give relevant information, to provide safer sex tools, and ultimately to assist sex workers with the issues of consent and navigating for themselves relationships in a safer way, especially in a country, of course, that's just dealing with high rates of gender-based violence generally. And sex work precisely puts women at a higher risk because many are Black and they're working outdoors.
Would we, for instance, if we decrim sex work, see special clinics for sex workers? I know we have some research sites, but open, for instance, like in the Netherlands.
So stigmatization, of course, is a big issue. And regardless of the legal framework, we know that there is work that continually has to happen around stigmatization. What's then needed is to have a look at the public health policy right now and decide, do we have enough, for example, specialized sexual and reproductive health clinics in general that the general public needs? And therefore, when we then go into the specialized needs for adolescents, sex workers, men having sex with men. Those are key populations at risk. And do we then need a standalone one for sex workers, or do we incorporate them in a more comprehensive way within the existing public health service? And those are questions that will come. And I think the imagination and the creativity will often get unlocked once we are no longer operating within a criminalized state of mind.
Deputy Minister, Dr. T has now alluded a little bit to implementation. So how will sex work legally be regulated if it becomes legal?
So basically, with that, it being removed as a crime from the statute books, then the other laws, regulations will apply. Labor laws, if people are working for in a brothel. Municipal bylaws when it comes to the location of brothels or people selling sex on the street. Those existing laws would apply. The second step is going to be the issue of regulation. That's a far more complicated issue because from government's point of view, it involves 3 spheres of government: local, provincial, national. We've got to look at what is best and most practical for South Africa.
Will all districts, when it comes to regulation, have the same rules, or will they be able to make their own rules?
No. The issue of zoning is a municipal function, so currently it would be up to each municipality as to determine, well, they would have laws in place already. So we do need to look at the issue of a broader framework, but that unfortunately will only come later.
And what kind of laws do they already have in place that you refer to?
Well, there would be municipal bylaws. So there would be municipal bylaws relating to zoning of businesses and where you can conduct businesses, for example. There would be issues of bylaws relating to soliciting on the street, which is where, unfortunately, a lot of the sex workers have problems with law enforcement officers. So those would be all municipal bylaws specific to that place, and they may differ from place to place.
Dr. T, as a health advocate, what sort of implementation rules would you like to see?
Within the health sector, I think there needs to be more training in terms of human rights from an undergraduate level. We need to have healthcare workers, nurses, doctors, and the whole allied, healthcare professional understanding the particular needs of sex workers. When we're thinking about the development of the condom, a lot of sex workers still have to use a condom that they have to negotiate with a male client, for example. So we need more tools that sex workers themselves, especially those who are women, can negotiate, but can also use themselves without having, the added burden of making sure that their client also, buys into that method. We need to have, for example, pre-exposure prophylaxis for HIV freely available everywhere, anywhere where people can get it. And I think the issue of healthcare education is still very important because that will eradicate a lot of stigma.
Deputy Minister, will sex workers pay tax, and how will that work?
The effect of the decriminalizing is that people can do what they want to do, make money the way they want to make it, because it's not a crime. So if you want to grow vegetables and sell those vegetables and make an income from that, or you want to give massages to people, or you want to sell sex. So yes, my understanding would be that if they're earning over, the laws would apply. If they're earning over a particular threshold, they would be liable to pay tax. Obviously, sex work would still be part of the informal economy, so SARS will have to look at how they, and probably have engagement with sex work organizations as to how they're going to look at ensuring that people who are meant to pay tax.
And if a sex worker feels they've been treated unfairly in a work environment, will they be able to go to the CCMA, and would the CCMA workers need to be retrained?
Look, already I think there's been one CCMA or Labour Court case involving a sex worker who wasn't paid by her client, where it was enforced that the client had to pay even though it wasn't legal, but still had to pay. In terms of working for a larger group like a brothel, then the Labour Relations Act would apply.
Deputy Minister Jeffrey, Dr. T, thanks very much for making the time to talk to us today. Well, that was our program for February. Until March, goodbye.